The email arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, blinking innocently in my inbox. The subject line alone made my chest tighten. A personal invitation. Looking forward to seeing you. From the sender, my ex-CEO husband, Damien Rothwell, the man who had fired me publicly, humiliated me in front of the board, and destroyed my confidence under the guise of business decisions. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a rush of memories flooding me. Every cruel word, every smirk, every deliberate slight he had thrown my way. Opening the email, I read his words carefully. He invited me to a private gala at the Rothwell estate, a so-called reunion of former executives and VIPs. But I knew Damien. He wasn't inviting me to reminisce or make amends. He was inviting me to humiliate me, to showcase his superiority, to prove he had moved on while I struggled in my career. And yet, despite knowing this, a spark ignited in me. Not anger, not revenge, something far stronger, opportunity. This would be my stage. The night he tried to belittle me would become the night I rewrote the story he thought he owned. But I wouldn't go alone. No, this time, I had allies, and they were ready to steal the spotlight in the most unexpected way. Twins. Two little humans who had changed my life in ways Damien could never imagine. Liam and Arya. They were my power, my proof that I had built a life beyond his influence. And tonight, they would be the centerpiece. I imagined the moment. Damien, perfectly groomed and arrogant, his eyes scanning the room for drama, only to find the very people he had ignored, the result of my choices, right there with me, shining brighter than his carefully constructed empire. Preparation was meticulous. I wouldn't just arrive, I would command attention. I arranged for a professional photographer to discreetly document our entrance, every smile, every perfectly orchestrated pose. I dressed for impact, not flashy, but elegant and unmistakable. The kind of style that whispered confidence rather than shouted it. Liam and Arya were outfitted like miniature royalty, knowing nothing of the plans but perfectly embodying the charm and intelligence that made them my secret weapon. As the car pulled up to the estate, I could feel my pulse in my throat. The massive gates, the polished marble floors, the valet lining up exotic cars. Everything screamed Damien's world, but I wasn't intimidated. I had spent years building a life from scratch, overcoming humiliation, doubt, and betrayal. And now I would step into his world on my terms. The door opened, and immediately I was flooded with the scent of wealth and power, expensive perfume, polished wood, and a faint note of tension in the air. Damien spotted me instantly, his eyes narrowed, scanning me like a predator assessing prey. Then, recognition struck. His lips curved into a practiced, polite smile, the kind that masked panic beneath. "Ah, Emma," he said. Smooth, practice. "I wasn't sure you'd attend." I smiled, serene and deliberate. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, guiding Liam and Arya forward. Their tiny hands clutching mine, they followed perfectly, their presence commanding attention in a way Damien couldn't control. The room went still. Guests turned, curious, whispers spreading like wildfire. "Who are they? Are those?" Liam waved confidently. Arya laughed, and the spell of our arrival took hold. Damien's jaw tightened imperceptibly. He had counted on me arriving alone, vulnerable, anxious, self-conscious. Not like this. Not with the embodiment of success, love, and undeniable power at my side. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "Well, you've brought your children?" The hesitation in his voice betrayed him. "Twins?" I said softly, almost innocently. "I thought you'd like to meet the new additions to my life." My eyes locked with his, steady, unwavering. "You remember how small my world was when you left it? I've expanded it, quite dramatically." Laughter, light and contagious, bubbled from our table as the photographer captured every moment. Damien's smile faltered. The room shifted. All eyes slowly moved from the glittering chandeliers and crystal glasses to focus on us. I realized in that moment that the power dynamics had shifted, invisibly but undeniably. I no longer needed approval, recognition, or validation from him, or anyone else in his circle. The rest of the evening stretched out like a stage play. Damien tried to interject, to charm, to guide conversation back to his orbit. Every attempt, the twins' curiosity, intelligence, and sparkling humor drew attention, admiration, and genuine warmth. Guests leaned in to talk, ask questions, and laugh. I watched Damien's discomfort grow, subtle but evident, a flicker of panic in his eyes whenever he realized the spotlight wasn't his. By the time dessert arrived, I knew we had succeeded in something far bigger than mere presence. We had rewritten the narrative. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a public testament that the life I built without him was stronger, happier, and infinitely more powerful than anything he had ever controlled. And the best part? He had no idea this was just the beginning. As the clock neared midnight, I leaned down to whisper to Liam and Arya, reminding them to smile, wave, and be charming. They giggled, delighted by the whispered instructions. Damien's eyes caught me again, his face pale under the soft glow of the chandeliers. He realized, finally, that he had been dethroned in a way he could never reverse, and all it had taken was love, patience, and a life fully lived on my own terms. By the end of the night, I had proven it. He could invite, mock, and expect humiliation, but I had arrived with the most powerful allies imaginable. My children, my confidence, my triumphs. They were all proof that the world I now inhabited was mine. And Damien, the man who once tried to define me, was left to witness helplessly the empire I had built without him. I left the estate that night not with bitterness, but with victory. Not with anger, but with power. And somewhere, in the cold, controlled corners of Damien Rothwell's mind, he realized the truth. You can mock me, underestimate me, or try to humiliate me, but nothing can erase what I've created, what I now command, or the life I have built for my children and myself. And that, I thought, as the car drove away into the quiet night, was the sweetest revenge of all. The morning after the gala, I woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains, a sharp contrast to the glittering chaos of the night before. The twins were still asleep, their soft breathing rhythmic and calming. I lingered in the quiet, allowing myself a moment to savor the victory. Not the small, fleeting triumph of being seen or applauded, but the deeper, more satisfying victory of knowing I had rewritten my own narrative. Damien's invitation had been calculated, but my response had been careful, deliberate, and unassailable. While he thought he held the power to humiliate, I had controlled every detail, every perception, every moment. It wasn't luck, it was strategy, built over months of planning, consulting, and quietly building an infrastructure that could withstand any attack. As I sipped my coffee, I pulled out a folder I had prepared weeks earlier, labeled simply, "The Plan." Inside were pages detailing logistics, schedules, outfits, talking points for the twins, and a backup strategy in case Damien tried to intercept or interfere. Every potential scenario had been anticipated. I realized then that the difference between triumph and humiliation wasn't always opportunity, it was preparation. The twins stirred, their bright eyes opening slowly, curious and energetic. Liam reached for my hand, Arya curled up next to me, and I felt the surge of protective love that had fueled every bold step I had taken. It wasn't just about showing Damien that I had succeeded. It was about creating a safe, thriving world for my children, one where no one could ever belittle them or me. By mid-morning, I was on my phone coordinating with the photographer and PR team. We needed the coverage from the night before to reach the right circles, the social media mentions, the photos in private feeds, the whispers among mutual acquaintances. Damien had underestimated how far influence could travel beyond his immediate presence. The goal wasn't to embarrass him publicly, but to establish visibility on my own terms. My assistant called, reminding me about the upcoming board meeting for my consultancy business. I laughed softly, thinking about Damien's empire and how naive he was to assume that one gala could shake my trajectory. While he spent resources trying to manipulate appearances, I had quietly built a network of professionals, investors, and mentors who supported me without knowing the drama of my past. I reviewed my schedule for the week, noting meetings with venture partners, calls with legal advisors, and brainstorming sessions with my creative team. Every decision, every interaction was a building block. I had learned the hard way that power was cultivated in silence, not spectacle. Damien's public persona relied on showmanship, mine relied on substance. Later that afternoon, I called a strategy session with the twins' tutors and mentors. Yes, I was intentional even in their education and upbringing. Liam was excelling in mathematics and coding. Arya had a remarkable talent for design and storytelling. I had nurtured their strengths deliberately, preparing them to carry our family legacy forward with confidence and intellect. They were, in essence, my secret army, equipped to impress, influence, and command attention wherever they went. By evening, I reviewed the photos from the gala. Each image captured not just our presence, but the subtle cues of control, elegance, and poise. Damien looked stiff, uncomfortable, overshadowed, not because of anyone else, but because of the undeniable reality that he no longer held sway over the narrative. Every whisper, every sideways glance, every impressed smile validated the quiet strategy I had executed flawlessly. As I tucked the twins into bed that night, I reflected on how far I had come. A year ago, Damien could have broken me with a single word, a single gesture. Tonight, he had been powerless while I orchestrated the events of the evening like a conductor with a masterful symphony. Power, I realized, was not about dominance. It was about foresight, planning, and patience. Finally, alone in the quiet of the night, I allowed myself a moment of gratitude, not for Damien's failure or humiliation, but for the life I had built, the strategic mind I had honed, and the future I was creating for my children. The real triumph wasn't the gala, the photos, or even his stunned expression. It was the freedom to craft my own destiny, guided by intelligence, courage, and love. The morning after the gala, Damien's office was buzzing with tension. He had arrived late, flustered, and for once, the room seemed to notice. His usual aura of control had slipped through his fingers, and colleagues exchanged quiet, knowing glances. I had expected nothing less. After all, a single night could not erase years of reputation, but it could start the domino effect of doubt. I received the first text from a mutual contact early in the morning. "Did you see Damien yesterday? He was unrecognizable." I smiled, taking a slow sip of my coffee, relishing the subtle impact of our appearance. My strategy wasn't about a spectacle. It was about planting seeds of realization. Damien believed influence relied on intimidation and showmanship. I had shown him that real power was measured by strategy, preparation, and timing. By mid-morning, the whispers had reached the press. A handful of journalists from high-profile outlets had caught wind of our presence at the gala. While Damien had planned his own image to shine as the controlling CEO, he failed to account for the optics of the twins and me, the elegance, the confidence, and the undeniable command of attention. Articles began circulating with headlines like, "Mystery Woman Stuns Gala with Twin Children in Tow, a story of strategic brilliance." My identity was still concealed, but the effect was palpable. I spent the morning in meetings with my legal and PR team, coordinating the next steps. The plan was meticulous. No overexposure, no brash claims, just subtle movements that would slowly reveal the truth while building a strong foundation for our long-term influence. My team handled media inquiries, ensuring that any mention of the twins highlighted grace, intellect, and poise, rather than sensationalism. Every detail was a calculated reinforcement of the narrative I wanted to establish. Meanwhile, Damien was trying desperately to regain control. He called for emergency strategy meetings, attempting to spin the gala night as a minor incident, an anomaly. He underestimated the power of perception, failing to see how confidence and preparation could outweigh titles and authority. He moved quickly, sending private messages to colleagues and board members, attempting to discredit rumors, but the subtle brilliance of our planning made it impossible to dislodge the growing intrigue. I took the opportunity to strengthen my own network. I scheduled lunch meetings with investors who had quietly admired my work for years, but had never seen me act in such a commanding capacity. These meetings were about cultivating trust, authority, and credibility, ensuring that any future endeavors would be met with support rather than skepticism. Every conversation subtly reinforced that I was not just a participant in the business world, I was a strategic force to be reckoned with. By afternoon, Damien had begun to show crack. I heard from sources within his company that he was pacing the ESOR office, flustered, giving contradictory instructions, and showing visible signs of stress. The image he had meticulously cultivated for years was unraveling in real time. It was no longer about the gala. It was about control, influence, and the realization that someone he had underestimated had outmaneuvered him completely. Later, I reviewed the footage from the gala that had leaked to certain outlets. Damien's expression in those frames was priceless: confusion, discomfort, and a faint panic in his eyes. Meanwhile, my twins and I radiated calm authority. Every photograph told the story of strategic dominance through composure, preparation, and foresight. I felt a quiet thrill knowing that, without saying a single word publicly, the narrative had shifted irrevocably in my favor. As evening approached, I sent a private, elegantly worded message to Damien. I trust you are reflecting on yesterday. Perhaps now you understand the value of foresight, preparation, and respect. I didn't expect a reply. The power of the statement lay not in confrontation, but in subtle, undeniable reassertion of authority. Damien would feel the weight of it in every conversation, every glance, and every report he received the following day. That night, as I tucked the twins into bed, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The gala was not an end. It was a strategic turning point, the first visible ripple of a much larger plan. Damien's attempts to assert dominance had failed, and the subtle, relentless foundation I had built over months had created an unstoppable momentum. I knew the next phase would be about solidifying influence, expanding opportunities, and ensuring that our power could never be questioned again. I sat back, watching the soft glow of the nightlight illuminate the twins' faces. They were both calm, confident, and radiant, the perfect reflection of everything I had built. This wasn't about revenge, it was about justice, strategy, and the undeniable impact of meticulous planning. And as I closed the door to their room, I smiled. Damien had underestimated me, and now, the world would see what happens when strategy meets resolve. The morning sunlight streamed through the office windows, painting the walls in a golden glow. I stood at the edge of the boardroom, watching as Damien entered, his usual confident stride replaced by a hesitant, almost uncertain step. His eyes scanned the room, clearly searching for dominance, but the subtle energy in the air had shifted. He couldn't put his finger on it yet, but he felt the power slipping from his grasp. I had arrived early, the twins at my side, both impeccably dressed and poised beyond their years. Their presence wasn't just for spectacle, it was a calculated demonstration of stability, intellect, and influence. Every glance they exchanged with the staff, every small gesture of grace, silently reinforced the narrative that the tide had turned. Damien was about to learn that perception, carefully curated, could wield more power than authority alone. The room was filled with senior executives and stakeholders, all seated with polite anticipation. Damien attempted a casual greeting, but the hesitation in his tone betrayed his anxiety. He tried to assert control, opening the meeting with his usual confident flourish, but it quickly became clear that the room's attention had shifted. People were no longer just listening to him, they were watching, calculating, evaluating. I stepped forward, my posture calm and commanding. "Good morning," I said softly, yet with an authority that carried effortlessly across the room. Heads turned, conversations paused, and even Damien faltered mid-sentence. "Before we begin, I believe it's important for everyone here to understand the changes taking place." My voice was measured, confident, and every word was chosen to reassert control without confrontation. As I revealed the details of our new corporate structure, detailing the investments, strategic expansions, and operational enhancements I had implemented, the room began to absorb the reality. Damien's jaw tightened, and I noticed the flicker of disbelief. He had imagined me as someone who would crumble under his schemes, but here I was, the architect of a thriving, unstoppable enterprise. Then came the final reveal. I turned to Damien, smiling gently but firmly. "And I should mention, Damien," I continued, "that all of these initiatives, including the recent expansions you've heard about in the media, were executed with significant personal investment. The capital, the strategy, and the vision. You've seen it all, yet the credit was never publicly attributed until now. The twins stepped forward, holding folders containing press clippings, investor statements, and accolades for the company's unprecedented growth. These, I said, motioning to the folders, represent the combined efforts and accomplishments that your skepticism never recognized. And yes, I added, turning fully to Damien, the person who orchestrated these successes is the same one you once dismissed. Damien's face drained of color, his usual confident mask shattered by the undeniable proof of my competence and influence. The room was silent, filled with a mix of awe, respect, and quiet murmurs of realization. It wasn't anger or revenge that colored the atmosphere. It was truth, and the stark, undeniable power of foresight and preparation. I took a moment to let the impact sink in. The twins, calm and composed, stood as silent witnesses to the transformation. They had seen me struggle, strategize, and ultimately prevail. Their presence was a living testament to the fact that power could be inherited through example, not entitlement. Damien had underestimated the ripple effect of consistent, intelligent effort. Finally, I addressed him directly. Damien, you once tried to diminish my capabilities, belittle my vision, and exclude me from opportunities that were rightfully mine. Today, you've witnessed what happens when those you underestimate are given the freedom, resources, and determination to succeed. My voice was steady, each word landing like a carefully aimed statement of truth. He opened his mouth, attempted a rebuttal, but no words could counter the evidence before him. The media coverage, the investor letters, the accolades, and the visible influence of the twins all painted a narrative he could not dispute. The room had seen it, and Damien realized, perhaps for the first time, that he was no longer the center of control. As I concluded, I glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of colleagues, stakeholders, and staff. The silent nods, the subtle smiles, the shift in demeanor. It was clear that the power dynamic had irrevocably changed. Damien, once a figure of dominance, had been quietly eclipsed by a combination of preparation, strategic intelligence, and unwavering resolve. Walking out of the boardroom that day, with the twins by my side, I felt a profound sense of triumph, not of vengeance, but of vindication, growth, and the quiet satisfaction of achieving what had once seemed impossible. The laughter, doubt, and exclusion of the past had been transformed into a story of resilience, strategy, and unassailable strength. And Damien? He was left to witness, in stunned silence, the undeniable reality that the underestimated are often the most dangerous and formidable force of all.